and select a group of people that can put together a 9/11 commission for the sake of the country and not for the sake of their political party. They can get to the bottom of this most dangerous of attacks. And Casey, I know you have been following the testimony from these law enforcement officers who claimed they never saw it coming. David wrote about his concerns that he wrote in a Washington Post column back in December. Somebody sent me a column yesterday that I wrote back in December. That's usually bad news for me because things are circled. But I wrote this. How ironic that the very people who convinced my parents they would be the cure for political extremism have turned into a band of radicals who present the greatest risk to American democracy since the Civil War. And that was written on December the 11th. I mean, these warnings were coming in, and it's not like David and I were the only people writing that in the Washington Post. The warnings were coming fast and furious. People were warning about Donald Trump, telling the Proud Boys to stand back and stand by. We're warning that this threat was coming, warning about January the 6th. Inside NBC News, we were talking to our EP, and we were talking about what's the footprint going to be for news operations that day. Everybody saw this coming. The police obviously knew this was coming, and yet they did nothing. Isn't this something that even Republicans, even Kevin McCarthy want to know why it happened, why their lives were at risk, why he had to call and beg Donald Trump to call off his terrorists?
It was right after it happened, Joe, for Kevin McCarthy, for Mitch McConnell, even Lindsey Graham, who went down to the floor and said, I've had enough. But then the politics changed. The Americans didn't seem to turn, or at least the Republican base didn't seem to turn on Donald Trump the way some of these people thought it would. And now here we are with, and I thought it was pretty significant, as David suggested, that Mitch McConnell went out yesterday and publicly said that he doesn't know if this commission can be successful. In terms of the big picture, David's column stood out to me at the time. And, I remember driving into work that day, and we deal with a lot of protests all the time. There's, often police presence. There's often, barricades and other things you have to navigate. And we typically don't worry that much about it because it is usually always under control. But I remember feeling that day as I looked around that there wasn't enough security for what we knew was going to happen. If you were looking at any of these forums, reading the reporting, seeing that, people were literally saying, march on the Capitol, bring weapons. You could see in the crowd, the way that people looked who were at the Capitol in the morning as I went inside, that something was different about what was going on. And it turned out that sort of feeling in the pit of my stomach was something that people, at the top had not been paying attention to. And they did know. And it's amazing to me listening to the testimony. The FBI sends an email the night before saying, hey, you might want to look out for this. The discrepancy you pointed out, in the testimony, questions about whether the Capitol Police had this intelligence. No one's laying blame at the feet of the cops who were desperately trying to hold that perimeter. The blame lies with whoever failed to erect the perimeter in the first place. And they know how to deal with events like this. It happens every year at the inauguration. It's not as though we're incapable of preparing and handling something like this, but they completely failed. And to let politics get in the way of figuring out why our government was almost overtaken seems really beyond the pale. And I do hope that they can figure out some way to find a credible group of people from both sides of the aisle who can actually treat this in the manner that it should have been treated and was treated on January 7th.